Fashion Week in New York is chaos disguised as glamour. Flashing cameras, champagne trays, conversations that sound like compliments but feel like daggers. After 17 years in the industry, I've learned to keep my head down and my ears open. My name is Sienna Greaves. I'm 44, based in Manhattan, and I've been a textile engineer and design technologist for over 2 decades. I don't do selfies. I don't chase influencers. I build the backbones of the clothes that walk the runway, fibers that stretch, breathe, resist heat, shimmer like liquid metal under spotlights. So when I got invited to Delmare's after party, it wasn't because anyone wanted my face in a photo. It was a nod, a silent thanks for work I'd done behind closed doors, garments that didn't fail, textures that made buyers stop and touch. My name wasn't on the press release, but it was in the fabric. The room was glowing, literally. Backlit walls, refracted LEDs casting colors across the champagne flutes. I'd just finished congratulating one of the junior design leads, Devin, when I saw her. Lila Delmare, founder's niece. Brand ambassador, though we all knew that meant puppet master in training. She wore a black silk halter that moved like smoke and a silver cuff that probably cost more than my rent. She smiled when she saw me, wide, too wide. Sienna, she called, gliding toward me like a shark with perfect teeth. Lila, I said, lifting my glass. Incredible show tonight. Congratulations. Thank you, she purred, eyes sweeping the room like she was already bored of it. Then I said it, the comment, the one I'll regret for the rest of my life. I leaned in, voice casual. I saw that final piece. Let me guess. Graphene microblend with reactive shimmer. That was your team, right? I meant it as a compliment. It was bleeding-edge tech, something I'd spent years developing. If they'd cracked it, I was impressed. But Lila's smile didn't widen. It dropped, like someone had pulled the string out of a puppet's mouth. She blinked once, slow. The room around us didn't notice, but I saw her eyes shift, not in surprise, but calculation. Her fingers curled slightly around her clutch. Interesting guess, she said softly. That's when her phone buzzed, just for a second. I wasn't trying to pry, but the screen lit up near her hip. One line of text, plain as day, add her to the cut list. Handle it tonight. My stomach dropped. I tried to laugh it off. I've seen similar signatures. Just a hunch, I offered, suddenly unsure. But she was already gone, walking toward a group of investors, the smile back in place like nothing had happened. 2 minutes later, a man in a headset and an earpiece approached me. Ms. Greaves, would you come with me? What's this about? He didn't answer. Just motioned toward the exit. The music played. People danced. My name was never announced. I was simply walked out of the party I helped build. One quiet step behind the glitz I'd helped create. And no one even looked twice. They didn't take me home. They took me to the office. Not the old wing where I'd spent most of the last 11 years testing new fiber blends or calibrating smart thread responses under different lighting conditions. No, they walked me past that, through the atrium, past security, into the glass conference suite that sat like a jewel box at the heart of Delmare HQ. It was nearly midnight, but the lights were all on. The man with the earpiece said nothing, just tapped his badge and opened the door. Inside, Lila sat at the head of the long, minimalist table. Her phone rested next to a printed folder. She was already smiling. Flanking her were 2 men in black turtlenecks and sharp loafers. I didn't recognize them, but they had the unmistakable scent of outsiders. Consultants, probably hired in the last 48 hours. One of them gave me a nod like he was about to sell me a timeshare. Sienna, Lila said. Thanks for coming. Please sit. I stayed standing. She clicked her nails against the table and sighed, mock patient. I'll make this easy. I've reviewed tonight's footage. I've also spoken with our internal innovation team. Your comment at the after party about our finale piece, it was a breach. A breach? I blinked. It was a compliment. It was a prediction, one of the consultants interrupted, sliding a printed screenshot toward me. It was a photo of the final dress, with my quote in a caption bubble. You described unreleased material science specs in a public setting. I laughed once. I made an educated guess based on light behavior and thread movement. That's not proprietary. That's what I do. Exactly, Lila cut in sweetly. You're very good at reverse engineering. which is why this is so unfortunate. She opened the folder. Inside was a single page, my termination notice. "You're firing me," I said, dead quiet. "For what? Guessing right?" "For violating creative confidentiality in a high-stakes season," one of the men said smoothly. "We've reviewed your NDA, Clause 3.4b. I stepped back, breath tight in my chest. "I built the textile system you just showed tonight. I engineered the base for your whole reactive shimmer line. You're using my own framework to accuse me of theft?" Lila smiled, then picked up a pen. "That's not how we see it." She signed the document with a slow flourish. "Effective immediately," she said. "Security has already revoked your credentials. Your final paycheck has been processed. Your exit is official." I stared at her. "You really think you can do this?" She didn't answer. She turned to the consultants. "You know what to do." One of them pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen. Within seconds, I felt it. The buzz of my work phone, an email, then another, then 10 more. I opened the last one. Company-wide communication. As of 12:14 a.m., Sienna Greaves is no longer with Delmare. Please forward all inquiries to Strategy Transition. It was signed by Lila. I stood there as silence filled the room. Not awkward, not uncertain. Deliberate, staged. "Thank you for your service," one of the men added. "We'll walk you out now." I didn't answer. I turned and left, each step echoing in that silent, glass-walled room. As I passed through the main floor, I saw them, faces at desks, eyes lifting, mouths not moving. They had seen the email, every single one of them, and not one said a word. 11 years, gone with a push of a button. I walked out into the cold without my badge, my name, or my job, but not without a plan. The cold slapped me across the face the second I stepped out of the building. 11 years, and all I had left was a silk dress that didn't belong to me, a dead keycard, and a phone full of unread messages from people too afraid to look me in the eye on my way out. No warning, no negotiation, just deleted. I stood still on the curb, watching a town car slide past in the reflection of the glass behind me. Somewhere up there, Lila was already rewriting the story, reframing the narrative like she always did. A leader cleaning house, a calculated risk. Fine. She wanted a clean slate? Let her see what truth actually looks like when it's unfiltered. I pulled my phone out and opened an app no one else knew existed. It looked like a calculator, just another utility on a crowded home screen. I typed in a 7-digit code I'd only ever whispered to myself when no one else was around. Accessing secure root, project Oathwoven. The screen flickered once, then went dark. A black screen, no sound. Then, failsafe triggered, level 3, trace mode engaged. I stared at the words as the air grew colder around me. A quiet vibration buzzed through the phone, a heartbeat under the surface. One by one, encrypted subroutines activated, blinking green beneath the shell. Data transfers queued. Audit reports auto-generated. Flags raised in background threads. Supplier chains, labor compliance. Cost distortion anomalies. Procurement falsifications. Every line of code I'd written in the quiet hours between deadlines. Every protection I'd built under the assumption that one day, the house I helped construct would try to bury me beneath its walls. The program moved silently, swift, precise. At the bottom of the screen, a final line flashed, preparing regulatory transmission node. Then, ready. I didn't press send. I didn't have to. It was automated, pre-configured. That was the point. I walked. No destination, just forward. Down 5th, past late-night storefronts and after-hours delivery trucks. My feet carried me like they had their own plan. No tears, no panic, only quiet. I had worked for 11 years in that tower, built the bones of the brand, bled for its brilliance, kept its flaws hidden under layers of polish. And they tossed me like I was nothing, like I was noise. But they forgot something. I wasn't just a name on their payroll. I was the infrastructure, the pipeline, the map. And now I was the storm. As I crossed 45th and turned east, my phone vibrated once more. A new message. System acknowledged. Data seeding in progress. I slipped the phone into my coat pocket. Let her find out the hard way. Lila Delmer stormed into the executive briefing suite at 6:04 a.m. red-lipped, unblinking, and already on her second espresso. The investor summit was in 2 hours. Her assistant trailed behind her like a forgotten shadow, arms full of folders no one would open. "Pull up the Q4 ethics compliance report," Lila said, snapping her fingers toward the wall display. The IT lead, a nervous guy named Marcus, tapped his tablet. The screen blinked, loaded the dashboard, then froze. A white overlay appeared across the main UI, clean and cold. Access denied. Biometric verification required registered user, Greaves, S. Sienna. Lila stared at it. "What is this?" she asked. But it wasn't really a question. Marcus swallowed hard. "We've, tried admin override. Full root attempts failed. The system's locked behind a biometric and a national ID tether." She turned slowly. "You mean you can't get into the audit reports?" "No, ma'am, not without her credentials. The program's redirecting all access attempts. No backup logs. No offline export allowed." Lila's face didn't move. "So you're telling me," she said, voice level, "that the seasonal investor summit, which will include a 30-minute segment on ESG performance and ethical sourcing, will begin in less than 2 hours, and I cannot access the compliance report?" Marcus looked down at his tablet. "Correct." Lila turned to her assistant. "Get me Renzo Vale." Her assistant blinked. "Who?" "Underground systems expert. Used to work for Mitsuru. Got blackballed in 21 after the lithium trace leak. Tell him it's triple his usual rate." She turned back to Marcus. "And get out." 30 minutes later, Renzo Vale walked in, wearing a faded hoodie and Doc Martens, holding a cracked laptop under one arm. He looked like someone who lived in the back of a server room. He tossed his laptop onto the table. "You're lucky I owed your uncle's office a favor." "I need full access to our compliance system," Lila said. "Immediately." Renzo raised an eyebrow. "You're the one who fired the engineer who built it, right?" Lila didn't flinch. She was a risk. Renzo plugged in a drive. "So's this. But here we are." He began typing, fingers moving faster than her eye could follow. Scripts scrolled across the screen. Command lines stacked and vanished. A silent war behind glass. "Interesting setup," he muttered. "She didn't just password protect this. She built it like a vault." Lila crossed her arms. "Can you get in?" "I can get past the lock," Renzo said. "But there's another layer, something she buried in the architecture. Biometric dual auth, tied to both facial mapping and a national registry." Lila's throat tightened. "You're saying only Sienna can open it?" Renzo smirked without looking up. "I'm saying even if I break the locks, I'll trip a failsafe. Something she planted deep, like a mine. You want in, you don't just need clearance, you need her blood." Lila stared at the screen. The clock ticked toward 7:11. The summit was less than an hour away. And somewhere out there, Sienna Greaves, the woman she'd tried to erase, was holding the only key. The cables snaked across the boardroom floor like veins. Renzo Vale sat cross-legged in a Del Mar executive chair, typing faster than he spoke. The room stank of tension and oversteeped tea. "This code isn't just encrypted," he muttered, his face lit by the ghost blue glow of his terminal. "It's adaptive. I've never seen anything like it outside of military-grade compliance nets." Lila paced behind him, arms folded, nails biting into her upper arms, then stopped talking and crack it. Renzo didn't look up. "Already did, twice, and both times it reconfigured on me." She stopped. "What do you mean it reconfigured?" "I mean this thing's alive," he said, finally glancing at her. "It's not just asking for ID or biometrics anymore. It's running continuous verification, voice samples, location pings, even time-based behavior signatures. I tried to spoof a static key, and it built a new firewall in under 5 seconds. Lila blinked. "But you said you could get in." "I can get into most systems," he said. "But this one was built by someone paranoid. Someone who knew exactly what kind of people would try to claw their way in." He leaned back, cracking his neck. "And now it knows I'm here." On the far wall, the main screen flashed white. A line of red text appeared. "Unauthorized override attempt detected. Audit chain initiated." Lila's stomach dropped. Renzo swore under his breath. She left a kill protocol. The screen went black. Then, system lockdown complete. Data vault sealed. Audit logs permanently archived. What the hell does that mean? Lila's voice rose, sharp and brittle. Renzo's fingers froze over his keys. It means the system just took itself offline, permanently. It self-encrypted the entire compliance database. No one's getting in now. Not you, not me, not God. The room went dead quiet. Then Lila exploded. She grabbed her MacBook off the table and hurled it across the room. It cracked against the glass wall and dropped to the floor with a sickening thud. A few assistants outside turned to look, then quickly pretended they hadn't. "You said this was possible," she snapped, voice shaking. "You said it could be done." "I said I'd try," Renzo said flatly, shutting his laptop. "And I did. But she designed this thing with one goal in mind, to burn it all down if someone like you got greedy." Lila opened her mouth, then closed it again. She pressed her hands against her temples, like she could squeeze back the panic already pooling behind her eyes. "Can it be undone?" she whispered. Renzo stood. Not without her. He slung his bag over his shoulder and gave her a tired look. "You fired the one person who built the only system protecting your brand from federal inquiry. And now you've lost both." As the doors shut behind him, Lila dropped into a chair, staring at the black screen in front of her. Outside, the skyline was turning gold with morning, and everything she had built was starting to fracture. At 2:15 a.m., my phone buzzed. I was sitting cross-legged on my apartment floor, sipping cold tea and watching the city blink through the window like it was waiting for something. I wasn't tired. I hadn't been tired since I walked out of Del Mar with nothing but my coat and the weight of 11 years shoved in my back pocket. The screen lit up. Level 3 trace mode. Live integrity, log activated. I tapped once. The feed opened. Lines of code rolled in like a tide. Location, HQ, user, admin, override. Guest, IP match, internal, auth bypass, failed. Target directory, vendor burial, archive.csv. I leaned in. The system wasn't just locked. It was watching. Every keystroke, every field change, every masked user attempt. Recorded, time-stamped, geotagged, and mirrored into the audit cache. Then the file name changed. Original, supplier, contracts Q3, Q4S master. Edited, vendor, deck, audit, final, 2. Field modified, outstanding balances. Line 27 through line 41. Previous value, 319,806 to 2178. New entry, 0.0. I blinked once, then again. She was trying to erase it. Not just hide it, vanish it. Over $300 million in unpaid vendor contracts from India, Tunisia, and South Korea. Every one of them flagged 6 months ago. All under pending resolution. Now she was laundering the record, replacing live data with dummy numbers that meant nothing. Creating phantom entries, wiping traceability. The cursor on the screen hovered for a long moment at the bottom of the list. Then it began typing a memo note. Final review completed. All vendor payments cleared via internal reconciliation. No discrepancies found. LD. I didn't move. The cursor blinked once, then froze. My system's response was immediate. Live audit snapshot complete. External regulators, FTA, Commerce, Global Supply Ethics Board. Status. Notified transmission integrity, green. Encrypted logs, sent. Case ID, 7342 ZEK. The final message flashed in calm, final text across my phone. Evidence received. Regulatory inquiry opened. I lowered the phone to my lap. The radiator clanked once behind me like it was trying to fill the silence. This was no longer my secret. It wasn't my burden, my job, my protection plan. It was out there now, with the agencies, with the systems that didn't care about designer shoes or brand lineage, or which niece happened to carry a last name. And Lila Del Mar, in her panic, had just handed them everything. I closed my laptop. For the first time since that night, my heartbeat slowed. The truth didn't need me anymore. It had already found its own voice. The investor summit began at 9 a.m. sharp. Del Mar's flagship auditorium was a glossy cathedral of money. Velvet seating, fresh orchids on every table, and digital name tags that pulsed with investor credentials. Lila stood backstage, her blazer perfectly pressed, her smile pasted on like she hadn't spent the night tearing apart her own office. She checked her phone for the 5th time. No messages from legal. No updates from Renzo. Just silence. The board chair signaled her from stage right. Time to walk out. She took a breath and stepped forward, heels sharp against the polished floor. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer began. Please welcome Lila Delmer, Brand Director and Innovation Lead for Delmer Global. Polite applause rose and faded. Lila walked to the center of the stage, lips curved in professional warmth. Behind her, a massive LED screen displayed the opening slide. Delmer Q4, Legacy in Motion. She tapped her clicker. Slide 2 loaded. The usual visuals: global growth numbers, glossy textile exports, sustainability buzzwords. She kept her voice steady as she walked the audience through projections, product lines, and digital retail expansion. Then came the compliance segment. The foundation of Delmer's integrity, Lila said, her tone crisp, is our commitment to ethical sourcing and environmental responsibility. We're proud to present our latest. The screen blinked. The slide disappeared. In its place, bold red text filled the screen. Compliance report invalid. Ethics breach detected. Live regulatory review in progress. FTA, Global Supply Ethics Board, Federal Commerce Division. A hush swept the room. Whispers broke out. Phones lifted. Lila stared at the screen, frozen. The board chair stood slowly, confusion etched across his face. Lila, what is this? She stepped toward the podium, her voice faltering. There must be a technical issue. I'm not sure what. A chime rang out across the auditorium speakers. The screen changed again. A new header. Active inquiry case. Jacques 7342, ZK. Unauthorized data alteration detected. 319,806,221 Ponton and 78 in unpaid supply contracts. Status, buried entries, recovered. Originating user, LD gasps. Phones lit up in every row. News alerts pinged. The words ethics breach and federal investigation were already trending. Lila, the board chair said again, his voice louder now. Explain this. Now. She swallowed. Her hands shook slightly as she stepped back. This wasn't supposed to. The system chimed once more. A final message appeared in white block letters. Submission confirmed by registered auditor. Sienna Greaves encrypted logs delivered to compliance bureaus at 02:17 a.m. EST. All user activity backed up and public record pending. Lila's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The silence in the room was no longer polite. It was loaded. Investors were already standing, speaking into phones, pulling up dashboards. On-screen tickers showed Delmer's stock plummeting by the second. The founder, her uncle, stood near the edge of the aisle. His expression was unreadable, then hard. He turned and walked out. The screen dimmed. The damage had been done. And Lila Delmer, once the name everyone clapped for, stood beneath a screen now screaming her downfall, powerless to stop any of it. By 3:30 p.m., the board had gone into emergency session. At 4:12, my phone rang. I didn't answer on the first ring or the second. I let them sweat through 5. Then I picked up. Sienna, came the voice, crisp, male, slightly breathless. Adrian Feld, chairman of the board. We'd like to see you tonight if possible. The sooner the better. They didn't invite me to the tower. They sent a car. When I arrived at Delmer headquarters, the mood had changed. The silence in the lobby wasn't elegance. It was fear. Security didn't scan me. The receptionist stood when I walked past. They knew now. I was led to the 12th floor. A different conference room, not glass this time, but walnut and velvet. The board was seated in a semicircle, phones face down, documents unopened. Adrian stood. Miss Greaves, thank you for coming. I nodded once. No smile. I didn't need one. He gestured to the seat across from him. We're in crisis. I won't pretend otherwise. I saw, I said. Tough morning. He winced. What happened? With the system, with Lila's access. None of us were aware of the safeguards you'd built. No, I said. You weren't. A pause. He folded his hands. You understand the situation. Our systems are down. Our suppliers are furious. Legal inquiries are inbound. If we don't stabilize fast, we'll lose what's left of our investor confidence. Correct, I said simply. Another pause. Then, finally, we need you back. You're the only one who can restore the system. The room held its breath. I leaned back in the chair. I'll restore access, but I don't come cheap. Adrian blinked. We're prepared to. I'm not talking about money, I cut in. I'm talking about terms. He nodded slowly. Go on. First, I said, Lila resigns, publicly, on record. She takes full responsibility for all ethical breaches and fraudulent editing. No one blinked. Second, I continued, all proprietary rights to the oath-woven compliance system, that's mine, are to be licensed to my new firm. In writing, irrevocable. I want brand control, IP protection, and full operational authority over its use moving forward. Adrian looked around the room. Not one board member objected. And third, I added, I'm not coming back as an employee. I'm coming back as a partner. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. You'll have it. I didn't shake it. Put it in writing, I said, standing. You have until tomorrow morning. As I turned to leave, the door opened. Lila stood there, eyes rimmed red, lipstick smudged. She looked smaller, like the brand had finally slipped off her shoulders and left her naked. She didn't speak, just stared at me like she couldn't believe it had come to this. But it had. And I wasn't coming back to serve the house I built. I was coming back to own it. The next morning, the press was already swarming the sidewalk outside Delmare headquarters. They weren't there for a product launch or a runway sneak peek. They were waiting for a fall and a rise. Inside, I stood at the same table where I'd once been fired. The irony didn't escape me. This time, there were no consultants, no threats, no earpieces. Just the board chair, a notary, and the contract. I read every word. The licensing agreement gave full control of the oath-woven system to my new firm, Greaves Interface. Operational authority, integration rights, exclusive compliance verification. I wasn't a name in the credits anymore. I was the name on the software. Next to it was a separate signed letter, Lila Delmare's formal resignation, effective immediately. Her signature was shaky. She had tried to rewrite the truth and lost her place in the story. I picked up the pen and signed my name with calm precision. No fanfare, just ink on paper. When I looked up, the board chair exhaled like he'd been holding his breath since yesterday. Thank you, he said. This will save us. I'm not here to save you, I replied. I'm here to rebuild what you let rot. He nodded. Outside, the flashbulbs started before we even reached the doors. Lila came out first. She was flanked by 2 PR handlers, head down, sunglasses on, coat cinched tight. But it didn't matter. The crowd knew her. The cameras erupted. Shouts followed. Lila, are the rumors true? Did you fake the audit records? Is this the end of your time at Delmare? She didn't answer. She just walked. And for the first time, no one stepped aside for her. They stared. They whispered. The power that used to part the crowd like water had vanished. All that remained was a legacy cracked down the middle. I waited a full minute before stepping out, not for effect, just to let the distance build. When I emerged, the questions shifted. Sienna, are you back in charge? Did you build the system that brought Lila down? What's next for Greaves Interface? I didn't stop. I didn't speak. I walked through the crowd like I wasn't the same person they remembered. Because I wasn't. I wasn't just a textile engineer anymore, or a ghost in the system. I was the woman who wrote the blueprint, who protected the threads that held the empire together. And when they tried to cut me out, I didn't break. I rewrote the terms. By the time I reached the car, the flashes had softened. The press had turned their attention elsewhere. I slid into the back seat, closed the door, and watched Delmare fade behind me. It wasn't mine anymore, but the future, that was. The new office sat 43 floors above Hudson Yards. Clean lines, quiet air, floor-to-ceiling windows that let in the whole city like a promise. I stood by the glass, coffee cooling in my hand, and watched the river stretch out past the skyline. The tower wasn't part of Delmare. It was mine. Greaves Interface had its name on the building directory now, etched in brushed steel, just below 2 venture-backed tech firms and a private equity group that had already reached out twice this week. The silence here was different, not the silence of being dismissed or ignored or stepped over. This was the kind of silence that came when people waited for you to speak first. Behind me, my team worked on the final integration module for 3 new fashion houses, all of them desperate to rebuild their compliance reputations in the fallout. Not one of them had asked about Delmare's involvement. They knew, everyone knew. My system didn't just expose one company, it redefined what would be expected from now on. Ethical sourcing, encrypted transparency, tamper-proof vendor tracking. It was no longer optional, it was the standard. And I was the one who wrote it. There had been offers, of course, early buyouts, partnerships, a magazine cover I turned down because they wanted me in full makeup and a silk cape. I wasn't interested in costumes anymore. What I had now wasn't revenge. It wasn't even redemption. It was ownership. Ownership of the years I'd spent behind the scenes, sewing structure into chaos, of the quiet warnings I gave in meetings, the times I was told to stay in my lane, or leave the investor talk to the real decision makers. Ownership of the idea that being a woman in tech didn't mean I had to perform gratitude every time I was allowed into the room. I had built a system that told the truth, even when no one wanted to hear it. And now they were all listening. My assistant knocked lightly on the glass. "Sienna, your meeting with Patagonia and Stella Nova's tech director is in 10. I nodded. "I'll be right there." She smiled and stepped back. I glanced once more at the skyline. For so long, I worked to protect someone else's name, someone else's empire. Now mine was etched in servers, stitched through networks, running silently beneath the biggest platforms in the industry, keeping them honest. And I wasn't finished, not even close.